I'm J.G. Michael, and this is Parallax Views. This edition of Parallax Views is brought to you by the $10 and above tier supporters of Parallax Views on Patreon. So, with that in mind, producers credit shoutouts to Galen, Matt, Gunnar, Mark, Simon, Alexander, Catherine, G, Tilo, Emilia, Jeremy, Jeff, John, Bert, Brian, Elliot, Michael, Brace, James, Nick, Mersham, Galen, Gareth, Arlen, Bo, Christopher, Michael, Gigadelic Media, Chance, Chase, Dan, Big Bob, David H, Y. Kellerman, Sadeed 13, Kathleen, David, Ava, Bob, The West Bank Robbery Podcast, Jamie, Enoch, Gary, Max, Ishtofer, James, Martin, Matthew Ho, Brian, Nobody, Thomas, and Dano. And now on to the show. Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. As always, I want to remind you that you can support the work I'm doing here at Parallax Views by donating to my Patreon at patreon.com/parallaxviews. That's patreon.com/parallaxviews. It's really important, given that I am without any advertisers or sponsors at this moment, that you, the listener, support me, if at all possible, with a donation on the Patreon page. Now, with that out of the way, we have a very special return guest on this edition of the program. Nina Burleigh is an investigative journalist who currently writes for The New Republic. She's the author of such books as Virus, Vaccinations, the CDC, and the Hijacking of America's Response to the Pandemic, Golden Handcuffs, The Secret History of Trump's Women, and most recently, her first novel, Zero Visibility Possible. She also runs the American Freakshow Substack blog and helped produce the documentary series Epstein's Shadow about Ghislaine Maxwell. In this conversation, Nina and I will discuss her recent New Republic piece entitled Trump 2.0, Here Comes the Night. We'll also talk about the origins of her American Freakshow blog and promote her book, Zero Visibility Possible, which she believes will be of particular interest to fans of this show, especially if you realize this show is named after the great 70s conspiracy thriller, The Parallax View. So, with all that said, let's get right to it with Nina Burleigh. Welcome back to Parallax Views, a guest that I hold in very high regard. I've been following her journalism for a number of years now. I'm so happy to have her back on. Nina Burleigh is an award-winning investigative journalist and New York Times best-selling author. Her latest book is her first foray into the world of the fictional novel, and it's entitled Zero Visibility Possible. She also has a Substack that we're going to talk about called American Freakshow. And I guess the first question I have to ask is, how are you doing, Nina? Because it's some wild times we're in.
Well, I have been a journalist for a long time, covering politics off and on for years. And you're right. I mean, I haven't seen anything quite like this, but I'm doing fine. I mean, at least I am one of those journalists who kind of, I don't know, I guess I have journalistic distance or something. I don't feel emotionally attached to the current events as much as maybe some people who come over and have dinner at my house and can't stop talking about it. I am, of course, concerned, and I mean, probably not concerned enough, given that, every day we learn a little bit more about the retribution plans. And I'm worried for people who were part of the, especially the anti-Trump Republicans. And, Senator Chris Murphy yesterday saying he expects arrests, that they'll arrest Congress people, which I just can't believe that. But then I also know, having covered Trump from 2015, the summer of 15 on, that every time he said he would do something or intimated that he was going to do something outrageous, I would say to myself, no, that's like the line that he's not going to cross. And every time he's crossed it. So I guess we have to take seriously this notion that we may soon be like Argentina in the 1980s, or, maybe not murderous, but actually, dictatorship authorizing, some really, corrupt political arrests, or, I think already we expect that they'll try to shut down the media. I'm going to write about that next week. They're going to try to shut down some of the media. They're obviously going to try to shut down these civil society groups. If the Senate passes that bill that the House passed, which I think you probably know about. And
That's the HR 9495 about the terrorist financing. Yeah.
exactly. Because, okay, citizens, anti-corruption organizations like Crew, Common Cause, any kind of anti-Trump organization or organizations that investigate corruption, they are not terrorist financed or financing. But I think that obviously that's what they're going to try to do. I mean, they're selling it as a pro-Israel thing, bill, which I think, that's part of why people are voting for it. I think they got some Democrats on it, but it's going to be used as a weapon. And so that's probably going to happen, and they're going to litigate the hell out of the media. So you're going to have people, you already saw Bezos doing what Tim Snyder, the fascist historian of fascism, calls anticipatory obeisance, where
Right. He's sort of kissing the ring.
exactly. I mean, the richest man in the world says, I don't think our newspaper should, I think we should end this tradition of endorsing a presidential candidate. It just so happens that you're doing that at this moment in time where the presidential candidate and now president-elect is not shy about promising that he is going to get revenge on anybody who didn't support him.
What's really crazy to me is I initially wanted to have you on because you wrote this piece in the New Republic where you do a lot of great editing work entitled Trump 2.0, Here Comes the Night. And already things have, barreled forward into like new territory.
Yes.
Now we have Trump openly calling for using the military for deportations. It's been interesting to me because I saw that even a very MAGA sympathetic senator like Rand Paul was freaked out by that. And then you have Sebastian Gorka's return, which is terrifying to me. It just seems like the news is just coming in really fast. What are your biggest points of concern right now?
Well, I mean, just to kind of telegraph from that article, the article that you're talking about, it's a cover story for December issue of the New Republic. What they do with these magazines, legacy media or old-fashioned paper magazines, is they pre-write the article that's going to come out when the election happens. So month before the election, I drew the short straw, and the editor called and said, would you write the Trump wins article? So I was reporting it in the weeks before the election. And what you see in it is the people, the best predictions that people who were watching him and watching Project 2025 could make. And the sources are, elected officials, like a congressman who was running the Project 2025, the Democrat who was running the Project 2025 House investigative, or whatever, it wasn't investigative. They were looking into Project 2025. And then a lot of good government types, lawyers, people who were potentially on the retribution list. And the takeaway is it's pretty simple. I mean, it's a long piece, but basically it starts out with, well, he has said in his Project 2025, which we can now say is absolutely the blueprint. The promise was that the minute his hand comes off the Bible on inauguration day, he's going to institute a whole bunch of shock and awe. And that was the plan. That was what I reported. And, people all agreed that that's the day that he was going to, that the regime was going to, just flood the zone with outrageous executive orders. And
Schedule F is a big part of this, right?
Schedule F is the first, one of the first things that I mentioned in there. In my prediction, based on the reporting, were institute Schedule F, which is reclassify thousands of federal employees to make them fireable, and then obviously to replace them with loyalists that Project 2025 has been vetting for half a year or more than a year. And that's the first thing that was predicted. The second thing was, I think, do some kind of theatrical, authoritarian roundup of, the promise that he was going to deport the undocumented, so that there would be some kind of activity right away where they send the military, or, well, he will try to, maybe, well, he's already said he's going to invoke a national emergency, which I don't know if that's the same thing as the Insurrection Act, but the Insurrection Act allows a president to domesticate the military. The military is not a domestic law enforcement organization normally. And then the final thing I think I was predicting that he would probably do what Republicans always do when they come in there, which is overturn the drill baby, open the drill baby drill stuff. But the fact is Biden didn't really close a lot of them. So I don't know whether that's going to happen or not. And obviously that's now the least of the concerns, because I think invoking a state of emergency, how does that look? I don't know. Does that mean you get, curfews in New York City? Does it mean, everybody stays home? Or if you assemble in public, you can get arrested immediately, you thrown in jail? Do his opponents, known opponents, especially the anti-Trump Republicans, get rounded up? I don't know. I don't know what it means. I've not lived in a country like I've reported from countries where stuff is going on, where lawlessness is the, everything's at the prerogative of the dictator. Hard to believe that they can pull that off here. But as you see, they've just thrown out Jack Smith, just rescinded the whole J6 case. So I think we're in uncharted territory. And yes, people are right to be alarmed, but I also think buck up, man, because don't go into the safe spaces I'm grieving mode. You got to be awake, aware, and ready to align with the opposition. Be brave. I mean, courage is required here, and we have a long history on the left, I think, of being a little tender on these issues, and you can't, I just think people need to buck up. I mean, we can talk about the last two freak shows I wrote were about this, what you've just said, the shock and awe is not just coming on inauguration day. The shock and awe is already being inflicted right now, and has been since he started naming these outrageous cabinet members who are.
I was going to say, not to interrupt you, but with these cabinet member picks, I'm just thinking this is like the ultimate kakistocracy, or government by the most unqualified, unscrupulous. I mean, he wants to put RFK in the HHS. I mean, oh my God.
And they might actually, the Senate, there's this great quote from the Roman Emperor Tiberius, who was an emperor and actually, bossed everybody around like emperors do. And there's this great quote where he says about the Senate, how eager these men are to be slaves. It's this terrific quote. like how eager these men. So you don't know. I mean, they did kind of make noise about Gates. I think people think Gates was the maybe like a bargaining chip, like he was used. I don't believe that at all. I think Trump likes people like he likes men like that. He, playing, having sex with 17-year-olds, check. Paying for sex, check. His buddy was Jeffrey Epstein for years, and he hangs around with people like that. So no, I think he was like serious about it, and then he had to give him up, but he's okay because he's still got, other predators lined up, like Pete Hegseth, which is totally outrageous. And that's the subject of my freak show this week, was called
Predator's Ball. I like that
It's
title.
basically about, Pete Hegseth is accused in a police report, 22-page police report, detailed, of roofing someone. Now, okay, he denies it, but he also paid her a bunch of money so that she wouldn't speak, and NDA'd her, silenced her with cash, legal hush money. So that's who's going to be in charge of our military, the Pentagon, the 800,000 employees, the giant budget. He's without doubt, a rank misogynist, or whatever the word is for absolutely disrespecting women, and a sex pest. You see that also in the transcript, or the police record. And so yeah, I mean, he's surrounding himself with these guys. We can talk about RFK. I mean, I did a book on the virus, on the called virus.
That's initially the first time I had you on the show, actually.
Okay, so we can re-up that, but basically, like, okay, RFK. Then the other Fox bots who have been on Fox talking about masking is not good for you. The vaccine might not be good. I mean, that's the Surgeon General, FDA guy, and HHS. The main thing is the public health system in this country is about to take a gigantic hit, and the FDA, like, what's going to happen? Like, they say that RFK is on record talking about removing the right of pharma to advertise. Okay, 100% down with that. Like, yeah, they shouldn't. Big pharma, somebody needs to take a crack at big pharma. On the other hand, what is that actually going to do? You know what it's going to do? It sucks up the revenue of all these big media, like the TV, that's who pays for the Sunday morning shows. That's who pays for all the political reporting on the weekends that the big networks do. It's maybe time for it to go. And a part of me, when I'm looking at these appointments, which they're not appointments, nominations at this point, a part of me thinks, well, here's the deal. This country was due for a shakeup. There's a lot that's not right. Okay. There's a lot that's not right with our health. RFK is right about the obesity and the packaged food stuff. And maybe there's safety issues with some of the chemicals that are in our food. That's for sure. And so, maybe this is all going to sort of balance out somehow. I mean, that's my optimistic. And, for as far as the Pentagon goes, like Elon Musk and what's his name? Vivek, I can't pronounce
Vivek Ramaswamy, yeah.
Ramaswamy and Musk and their Doge thing. Okay. So look, yes, it's corruption central, because what? You're giving Elon Musk, who does all this business with the United States government, the say over how much these agencies are going to get cut. On the other hand, you know what? Personally, me on the left, the Defense Department needs to be chopped. It's like the fact that we spend so much of our tax money, more, orders of magnitude more on the military than the next most, profligate country on military. It's insane. So, shake it up. If they can go in there, and I heard JD Vance talking on a friendly podcast before the election, talking about how they were going to look at the contracting and try to take a crack at it. So maybe they'll do something like that. So I'm willing to keep my mind, a part of it, open to the idea that, you know what, this ain't going to be pretty. And, but there might be certain things like the first Trump administration where people on the Democratic side were saying, well, if they break it, it can be remade better. And it brings it, it may allow, hopefully, that the Democrat or the opposition party, whatever it ends up being, I don't know if it's going to be the Democrats, they're in such disarray, but somehow there should be an opposition to this at some point that regroups and that manages to take some of their tactics and use them against the corrupt billionaires and use them. Now, it may not be possible because we're totally taken over by this kleptocracy. For sure, there's corruption. It's corruption central, and it's going to be self-dealing. And I don't know how you get around that. Lots of strategists out there on the left who failed with Harris. Hopefully other people will come forward and try to think of new ways to battle this movement.
I just wanted to add, my big concern is, and then we can get to your other American Freak Show piece that you wrote, but I'm just really concerned with the way in which I'm getting the feeling that this administration is going to be a bank robbery of the American public. I mean, he just replaced Matt Gaetz with Pam Bondi as his nominee for AG. Well, it turns out when she was the Attorney General of Florida, she fired 2 prosecutors who were investigating foreclosure fraud. That was just reported in the American Prospect. And I think that's a sign of things to come. I think this is going to be a bank robbery for the ultra wealthy.
Totally. I think that's what's going on. And I don't know how, because he's proved himself so immune to the legal system, I don't know how we come back from it. However, I think that I have to believe that we will. I mean, I saw this great quote the other day, or heard it. I went to the fundraiser for this committee to protect journalists in New York, and they were talking about somebody who recently died in France, who was a big supporter of the media, a big, international kind of rescuer of journalists in dire straits. And his wife was talking, and she said his favorite quote was from the Italian leftist Antonio Gramsci. And Antonio Gramsci was, a communist in the 1920s, locked up by the fascists for years. He died in prison, and he was not old. But he was in prison. He wrote thousands of pages of a prison diary, which has been published and is now kind of a seminal tome. And in one of just the one line that is really important to remember is pessimism of the mind, but optimism of the will. And that was this late journalist's, favorite quote. And I think about it now, and I may have actually mentioned it in my Predators Ball column this week, because I think it's important that you can be pessimistic, but you can also maintain the spirit of optimism and the certainty, really, that things can be reversed. There's no doubt that at some point, all of this will be history toppled. After I wrote the piece for the New Republic, it was so depressing to me that I had a cheap ticket to Berlin, and I've never been there before. I'm not a Germanophile, but I spent a lot. I travel a lot in Europe, and I thought I'm going. And I just got on an overnight, woke up in Berlin, and spent 3 days. And what's interesting about Berlin, many things, but I was in the east side. I was near the east side. So I was, I saw the Reichstag. I went to Checkpoint Charlie. I went to, I didn't go to the Stasi Museum, but I passed it. Of course, I saw the wall or the remnants of the wall, and the Karl Marx Allee, which is East Germany's sort of like beautiful street that the Soviets, it's all Soviet architecture, but it's this broad avenue with median strip, very photogenic. And what struck me was horrendous things happened here, right? Horrendous. They wiped out their Jews. They burned the Reichstag. It was in such disarray, and it was so evil that the world had to go to war, and then the world divided Berlin up. And you had the Russian sector, and then you had the US sector. And what's so amazing about it is that all happened before I was born, before you were born. And now every one of those places is a tourist attraction. And it just struck me like this is like how time and the tide of current events, the horrors, waves on to the next generation. Not that that's an optimistic concept, but it was just a sobering, and
there will always be tomorrow,
Yes.
Yeah. I guess I just wanted to cover two more things before I let you go because, first I wanted to say I was really interested in this article you sent me, God and Guns in Pennsylvania, that you wrote for American Freakshow. I love that title, American Freakshow, by the way, because I've often said to people that the first thing that comes to mind when I think of Donald Trump is Carney Barker. He's a P.T. Barnum figure. So American Freakshow fits perfectly. But this...
Thank you very much. And that is exactly what I was thinking when I started it as a joke, really as a vent. After I started it more than a year ago, after I read about Harlan Crow's Nazi table linen collection. Harlan Crow is the big donor to, owner, really, timeshare owner of the Supreme Court. He's Clarence Thomas's owner. And I thought, I just read it. I'm like, you know what? These people are freaks, and somebody needs to write. I actually tweeted somebody should start a podcast called American Freakshow. And then I read it. I read my tweet, and I was like, I should do that, but I'm not going to. I'm too lazy to podcast. I should write a column called that. And so I created a Substack, and now we're here a year and a half later, and it is exactly that. There is no shortage of them. I thought when the election, if she won, if Harris won, I could have just retired it. And now more freaks are pouring into the freak show tent.
Well, it was interesting in reading this God and Guns in Pennsylvania. I did not expect within the first paragraph to be hearing about the Moonies. But they've been involved in right-wing politics for a long time. Maybe you could give a rundown of what you were talking about in this article.
Absolutely. Where are you based? What state are you in?
I used to be based in Pennsylvania. Now I'm in Florida, which is like Trumpville, and it's
yes. Okay. So if you were in Pennsylvania, this is in Pike County. There is I assume your listeners and whose son Young Moon is. The Moon, they used to have the mass weddings, and he owns the Washington Times, and he's, a Korean Christian pastor, extreme right-winger. His son is just completely off the rails, decided to start his own sect of a type of Christianity that worships the AR-15 and weapons, literally. They have mass weddings where they put people on, they strap them in, they wear the wedding clothes, but they strap on an AR-15 at the ceremony. And this guy, Pastor Sean Moon, preaches and speaks in public with a crown of bullets and a weapon strapped on him. And every year in this county, I'm pointing because I have a house in New York State, but it's right across the river from me. I'm 2 hours away from New York, by the way. So this is not far from a major metropolitan area, but it's a backwoods. He started his own arms company, and he has a cult that hang out there. And every fall, they have something called the Rod of Iron Festival. And the right-wing Trumpies, hard right ones, showed up there this year. I think they come every year, but this year you had General Mike Flynn. You had this guy, Ivan Raikin, who's self-described Secretary of Retribution. He really does want to put, Congress people in the guillotine or, hang them. And you had Seb Gorka. I went there on the day that Seb Gorka was speaking because I just think that guy is appalling. And
Didn't he wear like some pin or insignia recently that was
well, yes. So
Hungarian? Mhm.
he's Hungarian, but he was raised in the UK. So he's got this plummy British accent, but he's a total fascist, and he wears a pin on his fancy Washington lobbyist looking navy blazer with a nice little white handkerchief sticking out. He wears a pin that's connected to or it's the emblem of really this organization called, I can't pronounce it, but it's a Hungarian club or organization that dates back to the pro-Hitler collaborationist government, fascist organization that ran Hungary during the Nazi era. That's who he is. He like proudly wears this Hungarian Nazi fascist pin. And he was in the first Trump organization, or first Trump administration, as you probably know. He was fired for shoving a reporter, I think, on Capitol Hill and using anti-Semitic terminology. And I mean, that's what he is. And I retweeted that article, the God and Guns in Pennsylvania, because I wrote it. I listened to him speak. I went to this crazy event, wrote the piece, God and Guns in Pennsylvania. And then after 2 days ago, when Trump announced that he was nominating Gorka for a minor role in the cabinet, but still a role that has to do with terrorism, I think, because he's a total Islamophobe. I retweeted it, and people were passing it around, and somebody responded to the tweet, oh, and doesn't he own shares in the company that Pastor Moon, the firearms company? So I Googled it just today, and I find not only is he like associated with the company, they literally sell a limited edition Gorka weapon, which I tweeted a picture of it today.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a gun that says America First engraved into the side of it. And yeah, so they're selling now. At the event, Pastor Moon introduced him with his crown of bullets on. He introduced Gorka, and Gorka, basically gave like a campaign pitch for Trump, where he was trying to get these people in their, hoodies, and older white people, mostly with, I say hobnailed boots, but like pretty scruffy people. And he's this plummy British accent, and he's trying to talk them into going door to door in Pennsylvania, because it was so key that they needed to get out and get their man elected. So he was really there doing this campaign pitch, and they had these gun nuts all in one place. And I don't know well, obviously Pennsylvania tipped it to Trump. But anyway, that's who he is, and I guess we're going to see more of him in the coming months and years, until he does something outrageous. And I don't know, maybe this round, shoving a reporter won't be enough to get fired from a Trump administration.
Before you get going, I'm glad you mentioned Pennsylvania, because I came from Pittsburgh originally, and I knew people that voted for Trump, and I was always surprised, because it wasn't like they weren't necessarily even hardcore MAGA people, but they had a lot of discontent. And I'm like, you don't understand. Trump is the opposite of everything he's claiming to be. He's not going to help you. He's not going to help working class people. He's going to fill the pockets of the rich. And one of the weirdest things I've seen with the Trump phenomena is just the fact that everything they accuse the left of, it's, oh, the left is conspiring. The left wants to get their people richer. That's literally everything that the MAGA movement does. It's filled with grifters accusing everyone on the left of being grifters, when it's really the right that are the grifters. And I think this will lead into just maybe giving you a chance to talk about your new novel, Zero Visibility Possible, because I think it deals with this sort of phenomena of, black is white, white is black, and sort of
Absolutely.
everything's topsy-turvy.
Absolutely. So I wrote this novel 2 years ago, or started working on it 2 years ago, just published it this fall. And it is a short 50,000 word, tightly written, I'm told. It's getting great reviews. Just a short description of an imagined response to the the actual worst mass shooting in American history, which is the Las Vegas shooting. It opens with a short description of that, which is actual event. And then I imagine a group of characters in the media and in Washington and in traveling to New Mexico and Vegas, slowly confronting the wall of disinformation and conspiracy theorizing that starts to come out about this man, who is the character is actually based on the actual shooter. And the theorizing and sort of like there's a Bannon type character who's, it's all about story. We need a hero, and this man Trump is our hero, and this, this shooter was obviously a Hillary voter. And then you have as they go further and further, they start to understand that it's this conspiracy theorizing and this organization, this kind of octopusy organization, is actually running their falling apart legacy media operation. And so it's a 3 days in the aftermath of the worst mass shooting in America. And it's about disinformation and about the political use of public trauma. And I think it's really timely, and I've been told it's a great read. So I hope your readers or your listeners will look it up.
I'm definitely going to give it a read. Maybe we can talk about it another time,
I
because
would love
I'd like to read it.
because
Yeah.
there is a Parallax View sensibility to it.
Real quick, I hope you understood what I was saying earlier about even not just Pennsylvania, but places like, if I go to a state like Ohio, I just see a state that's been wrecked, I think, in my view, by Republican rule. And,
Totally.
What's that?
Totally. And they don't, the Ohio legislature is really one of the most corrupt and autocratic operations in the country. There's a whole book written about this. It's called Laboratories of Autocracy, and it's about the Ohio legislature and what they've done. They are completely bought and paid for by the frackers and the drillers. And they have ravaged Eastern Ohio and the Western Pennsylvania with this fracking. I did a documentary on that for the Norwegian government, Norwegian public broadcasting a couple of years ago. So I spent some time out there. Absolutely the most corrupt operation. And it's completely taken over, gerrymandered. And so, but they've managed to train these working class people that they're not the cause of their problems, that the cause is, and this is what Trump did the minute first day he came down the freaking escalator in 2015. Your problems are due to those brown people who just came over from El Salvador or came up from Mexico. And they have Fox News nightly feeding people that. And, Fox News is one of the great evil empires of our situation.
Well, that's that's
we hope that Murdoch dies soon, and that the two sons, the family is going to inherit it. It is like Succession. The one son who's running it now lives in Australia, totally down with this right-wing bullshit. And the other family members are not down with it. And so one hopes that somehow, some way, they're within that organization, they pull back on this, because it's been a disaster to the American mind.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is, and I'll leave it at this, and we'll wrap on this, but, I don't hate the rural people I've met that are struggling in Pennsylvania or Ohio. I think they've been hoodwinked, though. And I think they would be better served by a person like Bernie Sanders or people of similar ilk. And they've just been completely hoodwinked by this billionaire financed Trump phenomena that's lying to them.
Yes. And see, that's where 2016 election, I blame on the Democrats. I think if they had run a Bernie, people are desperate for change, desperate. And if they had run a Bernie, he was the only one who could speak to and put a very clear distinction between the left and the right. And he talked about it. And enough of these people, they want, they want the things that Bernie talks about. They want Medicare for all, and they want a living minimum wage everywhere. And if that happened, I think if this country had those two things, there would be a lot less anxiety and stress that drives people to support the maniac like Trump, a lawless. But that's my opinion.
Well, hey, thank you again, Nina Burleigh, for coming on Parallax Views, and I hope everyone will check out the book, Zero Visibility Possible, and that they'll subscribe to your Substack, American Freakshow.
Right. Thank you so much. Let me know when you post it, and I will share it.
Well, that does it for this edition of Parallax Views. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Nina Burleigh, and that you'll check out her new novel, Zero Visibility Possible. I highly recommend her work. I think she's a great author and journalist. As always, if you can, please support me at patreon.com/parallaxviews. One more time, that's patreon.com/parallaxviews. And with that being said, until next time, you've been listening to Parallax Views with Parallax Views to Parallax Views with Parallax Views.
The way out is not simply to say, don't do it, just to prohibit. It's nothing else. If we don't do it, others will be doing it like crazy. So, we have to confront the problem. But no, basically, I know of the great anxieties, problems, new forms of control, but it's also new forms of freedom. This is why I always emphasize that internet and all this new digital stuff, it's a very ambiguous phenomenon, but it's the field of struggle. New forms of enslavement, but at the same time, new incredible forms of freedom. We have to accept the fight with no nostalgia for old, allegedly more authentic communities or whatever. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid.